All right, let's go ahead and continue on with number 3 here. It says 2 airplanes leave the same airport at the same time. The first plane flies to a landing strip 350 miles south, while the other plane flies to an airport 725 miles west. How far apart are the 2 planes after they land? So I'm sketching out my cardinal rows here with my directions north, south, east, and west. And so we've got plane A. Plane A is going to take off from the airport, which is going to be in the center of that cardinal rows there. And he's going to fly 350 miles south. The other plane is going to take off from the airport and go 725 miles west. And we're supposed to figure out now the distance between these 2 airplanes when they land. So this distance. Well, as you can see, why this fits into this particular section is because what we have is a right triangle. My west and south there have made a right angle right here. This third side that connects their final destinations here, all right, that is going to be the hypotenuse of my right triangle. It's across from the right angle. These guys are the legs. They make the right angle. This guy here is my hypotenuse. It's the one across from the right angle. So, formula says I'm going to take these and square them. So 350 squared and 725 squared, which is what you see right here. And that's going to be the same as the hypotenuse squared. And again, in this formula here, the Pythagorean formula, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, the hypotenuse is always c. So 122,500 plus 525,625 is the same as the hypotenuse squared, or c squared. Obviously, we can add these up and we get 648,125 is the same as c squared. Remember, this side of the triangle, the hypotenuse, isn't the hypotenuse squared. It's just the hypotenuse, so it's not really c squared, it's just c. So to get from c squared back to c, we take the square root, because the square root will cancel out the square. And again, because it's solving an equation, I can't just do it on one side of the equal sign, I have to do it on both. So I'm also going to take the square root of 648,125, and that's going to give me my hypotenuse. When I take the square root of 648,125, the result is about 805, so the hypotenuse is 805, or in context of the question, these 2 planes, this distance here, are now 805 miles apart. This distance here represents 805 miles. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the concluding examples here in the Check It Out section. Number 1 is asking me to find the length of the hypotenuse. So very clearly they're asking me for c here, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. Remember, these 2 sides here, because they make up the right angle, are called the legs. And the formula says I'm going to square the lengths of the legs. So I'm going to take 5 and square it, and 7 and square it. And that's going to be the same as my hypotenuse squared, or c squared. So 25 plus 49 is the same as c squared, or c squared is the same as 74. Now again, that side of the triangle that's marked c, it doesn't say c squared. It just says c. So I've got to get my answer right now, which represents c squared, back to c. And the way we do that is by taking the square root. So I'm taking the square root all the way across here. When I take the square root of 74, the result ends up being 8.60232527. And since we're rounding here to the hundredth like we did earlier, that's why we wrote 8.60. The square root of 74 is my solution. The square root of 74 rounded is 8.60. Take a look at question 2. Very similar to a question we had earlier. We're finding the unknown side, and the unknown side now is b. Well, remember, b has to represent one of the legs. We know it's one of the legs because in this illustration, it's one of the 2 sides that makes the right angle. So these 2 guys are the legs. 4 and b represent the legs here. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this into my formula. Again, the formula says that my 2 legs squared, So 4 squared and b squared is equivalent to my hypotenuse squared, 12 squared. Well, 4 squared is 16, and 12 squared is 144. And b squared for right now is just going to have to stay b squared until I can solve. All right, treat this like solving an equation, like we've done every other question. Numbers have to move to the right. We're going to keep that variable on the left, so this isn't a problem. Numbers on the right, this isn't a problem. This is a problem. He's a number, he's on the left. Numbers belong on the right. So throw 16 over to this other side. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 16 all the way across. So I do that, and I've got 144 minus 16 there. That's going to change into 128. So b squared is 128. But again, this side of the triangle isn't marked b squared, it's just marked b. So I'm going to go ahead and take the square root to finish to find b here. When I take the square root of 128, the result is 11.3137085. They've rounded again to the nearest hundredth, and that's how they came up with 11.31. Now, while I go ahead and clean this up so we can go ahead and go on to question number 3, remember there are 2 values for every square root. Negative 11.31 there would also be the square root of 128. That is correct. However, we're talking about a distance now. A distance, the side length of that right side of the triangle marked B, isn't going to be negative 11.31 units. That doesn't make sense in context. So while there are 2 square roots of 128 here, right, that particular answer isn't going to do me any good, so we just discard it. All right, the last one is very similar to an earlier question. It says that 2 birds leave the same spot at the same time. And bird A is going to fly 11 miles south, and the other is going to fly 7 miles west. How far apart are the 2 birds after they reach their nest? So same cardinal rows here. And bird A is going to fly 7 miles to the west. So he's going to start at the middle and go 7 units to the left, or 7 in the westerly direction. Bird B, on the other hand, he's going to go south. He's flying from the same location, 11 units south, 11 units down. We're supposed to figure out how far the 2 birds apart are now once they reach their final locations, their final nest. So just like the plane question we had earlier, the glider question, when I connect those 2 points, there's my right triangle. The south and the west direction form my right angle. These 2 sides are the legs of my right triangle. This side here is my hypotenuse. So again, the formula says if I take these guys and square them, it's going to be the same as this guy, my hypotenuse squared. Remember, the hypotenuse is c in the formula. So 7 squared plus 11 squared is going to be the same as c squared. So 49 plus 121 is going to be the same as c squared. Well, when I add those 2 up, that's the same as 170. Well, the problem is, though, this is c squared, not c, which is what the triangle is. Just like in every other problem we've done here today, to get from c squared back to c, you have to take the square root, because the square and the square root cancel each other out. But again, because we're solving an equation, you also have to take the square root over there. When I take the square root of 170, the solution that's derived is 13.0384041 on a calculator, which is why they're answering that these guys are about 13 miles apart. If you want to round to the nearest hundredth like we did earlier, they're 13.04 miles apart.